"Lock every door," the elder whispered, his voice trembling beneath the toll of the great cathedral bells. "If the Alpha King ever finds the girl with the forbidden mark, the kingdom will never be the same." Those words had haunted Blackwood Keep for 19 years, passed from one frightened guardian to the next like a secret too dangerous to die. Hidden beneath the oldest tower in the Northern Kingdom lived Evelyn Carter, a quiet young woman with porcelain skin, soft chestnut hair, and clear blue eyes that had never seen the world beyond iron-barred windows. She had been told since childhood that the moon itself had cursed her birth, that she was too dangerous to walk beneath its light, too dangerous to stand beside another wolf, and far too dangerous to ever be seen by the Alpha King. Every full moon, while laughter echoed across the valleys and packs gathered beneath silver skies to celebrate ancient traditions, Evelyn remained alone inside cold stone walls, listening to distant music she was forbidden to join. She never complained. She simply wondered what crime a newborn child could have committed before taking her first breath. The old women who brought her meals never answered her questions. They only reminded her to keep the silver bracelet locked around her wrist. Beneath it rested a crescent-shaped mark no one was allowed to see. They called it the moon scar, though no one dared explain why. Whenever she asked, silence always followed. Outside the tower, however, the entire Northern Kingdom prepared for the Grand Moon Selection Ceremony, an event held only once every generation. Hundreds of noble Omega women traveled for days through dense forests and frozen mountain passes, arriving in elegant carriages draped with family banners, each hoping to become the chosen Luna of Caleb Thornridge, the Alpha King whose wisdom and strength had united rival packs without endless war. Every village buzzed with excitement. Merchants filled the streets with lanterns and ribbons. Children climbed wooden fences just to glimpse the royal procession. Even wolves from distant territories crossed nearly 200 miles for the chance to witness history. Yet hidden beneath all that celebration lingered another emotion no one wished to speak aloud. Fear. Because the old prophecy had returned. The royal council dismissed it as folklore, but the oldest elders remembered every word. They believed that one day the Alpha King's true Luna would not come from noble blood or powerful lineage. She would come from the shadows, carrying a forbidden mark capable of changing every law written beneath the moon. Deep inside her lonely chamber, Evelyn gently touched the silver bracelet as warmth pulsed beneath the metal for the first time in years. She froze. The strange sensation spread slowly across her arm like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. Outside, distant horns announced the Alpha King's arrival at Blackwood Castle. The ancient stone beneath her feet seemed to hum with quiet life, and somewhere far beyond the tower walls, a powerful wolf suddenly stopped walking. Caleb Thornridge had crossed countless battlefields without hesitation, yet in that single impossible moment, his heartbeat stumbled as though another soul had whispered directly into his own. Neither of them understood what had just begun, but under the rising full moon, destiny had already awakened. The warmth beneath Evelyn Carter's silver bracelet refused to fade. It pulsed in quiet rhythm against her skin, gentle yet impossible to ignore, as though an invisible heartbeat had awakened beneath the ancient crescent hidden from the world. She hurried toward the narrow tower window and pressed her fingertips against the cold stone. Through the iron bars she caught only fragments of the celebration below. Thousands of lanterns floated above Blackwood Castle like golden stars brought down from the heavens. Music drifted through the crisp evening air while elegant carriages lined the royal courtyard. Every noble family had come hoping that tonight would shape the future of the Northern Kingdom. Evelyn watched in silence, wondering what it might feel like to walk freely beneath the same moon everyone else celebrated without fear. A soft knock echoed behind her before the heavy oak door slowly opened. An elderly woman entered carrying a wooden tray with warm bread, vegetable stew, and a single candle. Her name was Miriam, the only guardian who had ever shown Evelyn quiet kindness. Tonight, however, the older woman's smile had vanished. She quickly locked the door again before placing the tray on the small table beside the fireplace. Her hands trembled as she looked toward the silver bracelet. "It has started, has it not?" she asked softly. Evelyn hesitated before nodding. It has never felt like this before. Miriam closed her eyes for a long moment as though gathering strength from a prayer she had repeated many times over the years. Then she reached beneath her cloak and removed a small leather journal wrapped with faded blue ribbon. Dust covered its worn edges, and several pages had yellowed with age. "This belonged to your mother," she whispered. "I was ordered to destroy it the night she disappeared, but I could never do it." Evelyn stared in disbelief. She had spent 19 years believing nothing remained of the woman who had given her life. Her fingers shook as she accepted the journal. Inside, delicate handwriting filled every page. Most entries described ordinary days beneath the moon, simple memories of wildflowers, forest streams, and dreams of raising a daughter without fear. But near the center she discovered a single sentence written darker than the rest. "If the moon scar ever awakens, never let the royal council find her before the Alpha King does." Evelyn looked up, confusion filling her eyes. Why would mother write this? Before Miriam could answer, loud footsteps rushed along the corridor outside. Voices barked urgent orders. Another guardian pounded against the door. "Open immediately. The council has ordered every tower searched." Miriam's face lost all color. She snatched the journal and hid it beneath loose stones inside the fireplace before pulling Evelyn away from the window. "Listen to me," she whispered, gripping her shoulders. "There are people inside this castle who have protected you your entire life, and there are others who have spent 19 years praying they would never have to see your face. Tonight they know something has changed." The pounding grew louder. Down in the royal courtyard, Caleb Thornridge stepped from his carriage as every noble bowed their heads. He acknowledged them with calm dignity, yet his attention drifted elsewhere. An unfamiliar sensation tugged gently at his soul, pulling his gaze toward the oldest tower overlooking the castle grounds. He had never noticed that forgotten tower before. Now he could not look away. High above, hidden behind stone walls and iron bars, Evelyn instinctively placed her hand over the bracelet once more. The warmth answered immediately, brighter than before, while somewhere deep inside the Alpha King's heart, his wolf quietly whispered a single word he had never expected to hear. Caleb Thornridge stood beneath towering stone arches while silver banners stirred gently in the evening breeze, yet the celebration unfolding around him felt strangely distant. Noble families smiled with carefully practiced confidence as each young Omega entered the grand hall, hoping to catch the attention of the Alpha King. Elegant gowns shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, musicians filled the chamber with graceful melodies, and the scent of fresh pine and blooming winter roses drifted through the air. It should have been a night filled with certainty. Instead, Caleb could not quiet the restless feeling growing inside him. His wolf had always been calm, disciplined, and impossible to distract during royal ceremonies. Tonight it paced silently within his soul, ignoring every introduction offered by the council. Lord Aldrich, the oldest member of the royal council, noticed the king's distant expression and stepped closer with measured concern. "Your Majesty, the first families are prepared." Caleb offered a polite nod, although his attention remained fixed on something he could not explain. One by one, the young women approached with quiet dignity. Each bowed respectfully before returning to the line, yet none stirred the strange pull echoing through his heart. The invisible thread remained somewhere else, beyond the great hall, beyond the music, beyond every face gathered beneath the moonlit ceiling. As the ceremony continued, Caleb instinctively glanced toward the castle windows overlooking the oldest tower. For only an instant he thought he saw the faint outline of someone standing behind iron bars high above the courtyard. The figure disappeared before he could be certain, but the feeling inside him intensified. At that very moment, Evelyn sat quietly beside the fireplace as Miriam carefully removed the loose stones hiding the leather journal. "There is more you must know," the older woman whispered. She turned several fragile pages until an old map slipped onto the wooden floor. The parchment revealed secret passageways beneath Blackwood Castle, routes forgotten by almost everyone still living. A faded note had been written beside one narrow tunnel. "If the moon scar awakens before the truth is revealed, take her through the eastern passage before sunrise." Never trust the council. Evelyn looked from the map to Miriam, her breathing growing unsteady. My mother knew this would happen. Miriam slowly nodded. She hoped it never would. Before either woman could speak again, the bracelet suddenly glowed beneath Evelyn's sleeve. The silver clasp became warm enough that she quickly pulled it away from her skin. A soft light escaped through the tiny gap between the bracelet and her wrist, illuminating the room with a pale silver shimmer. Neither of them touched it. Neither understood why it had changed. Far below, Caleb paused in the middle of another formal greeting. Every sound inside the grand hall seemed to fade as the same mysterious warmth spread through his chest. His heartbeat became steady, powerful, and strangely peaceful. His wolf, silent until now, finally lifted its head. Not with a growl. Not with fear. But with unmistakable recognition. Caleb drew one slow breath before quietly asking, "Who is in the eastern tower?" The musicians continued playing, masking the sudden silence among the royal council. Lord Aldrich answered almost too quickly. "No one important, Your Majesty. Only abandoned chambers that have remained sealed for years." Caleb held the elder's gaze a moment longer. Something in that answer felt carefully rehearsed. Across the hall, several council members exchanged uneasy glances before looking away. They believed the conversation had ended. It had not. For the first time in many years, Caleb sensed that someone inside his own castle was hiding the truth from their king, and high above the celebration, Evelyn unknowingly took her first step toward the concealed doorway behind the ancient fireplace, unaware that destiny had already begun leading both of them toward the same forgotten path. The hidden passage behind the fireplace had not been opened in decades. Dust drifted through the narrow corridor as Miriam lifted an old iron lantern from a forgotten shelf and carefully lit its wick. Warm amber light revealed rough stone walls stretching deep beneath Blackwood Castle. Evelyn Carter stood motionless at the entrance, her pulse racing as she looked back one final time at the small chamber that had been her entire world for 19 years. The tiny bed beside the window, the wooden table, the worn books she had read countless times, and the iron bars that had separated her from the moon suddenly felt less like protection and more like a carefully built prison. Miriam gently placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "There is no more time," she whispered. "If the council reaches this tower before we leave, they will never allow you to discover the truth your mother tried to protect." Evelyn nodded quietly, taking one careful step into the darkness. Behind them the concealed doorway closed with a deep echo that disappeared beneath the sounds of celebration above. In the grand hall, the moon selection ceremony continued with flawless precision, at least to those watching from the marble floor. Noble families applauded politely while musicians performed elegant melodies and servants carried silver trays filled with warm bread, roasted vegetables, fresh fruit, and sparkling cider. Yet Caleb Thornridge noticed details others ignored. Several council members had quietly left the ceremony one after another without explanation. Guards who normally remained beside the eastern entrance had vanished. Even Lord Aldrich appeared distracted, checking the great clock mounted above the hall more often than the honored guests before him. None of it seemed accidental. Caleb slowly turned toward his trusted captain, Daniel Brooks, a veteran whose loyalty had never once been questioned. "Walk with me," the king said calmly. Together they stepped onto a quiet balcony overlooking the castle gardens where cool autumn air carried the scent of pine. Caleb lowered his voice. "Tell me the truth. Has the council hidden something from me inside this castle?" Daniel hesitated longer than usual before answering. "Your Majesty, I have heard whispers for years, but every servant who asked too many questions was transferred or dismissed. The oldest tower has always been forbidden. Even the castle maps no longer include it." Caleb looked toward the distant silhouette rising above the eastern wall. The same strange feeling pulled at him with growing certainty. It was no longer a faint curiosity. It felt like someone was waiting, frightened and alone, only a few hundred feet away. Beneath the castle, Evelyn and Miriam reached an underground chamber where ancient carvings covered every wall. Wolves stood beside moons carved in white stone, while graceful women wearing silver crowns faced the night sky with peaceful expressions. Evelyn slowly approached one faded mural nearly hidden beneath centuries of dust. The woman in the carving looked remarkably familiar. The same gentle eyes. The same shape of her face. Even the crescent mark upon her wrist matched the one hidden beneath Evelyn's bracelet. Before she could speak, the lantern flame flickered without wind. A soft silver glow spread across the mural, revealing words that had remained invisible until that moment. Only the true Luna shall awaken the forgotten path. Miriam stared in stunned silence. She had walked these tunnels years before and had never seen the inscription. Evelyn instinctively reached toward the ancient carving. The instant her fingertips brushed the cool stone, the moon scar beneath her bracelet shimmered with quiet light. Far above, Caleb suddenly stopped breathing for a single heartbeat. He placed his hand against his chest as warmth flooded through him stronger than ever before. There was no doubt remaining inside him. Somewhere beneath Blackwood Castle, someone had just awakened a secret that had been waiting for him long before he was crowned king. The hidden chamber remained perfectly still after the silver words appeared across the ancient wall, as though the castle itself had been waiting countless years for someone to awaken its forgotten memory. Evelyn Carter slowly lowered her trembling hand, but the gentle glow beneath her bracelet continued to shine through the narrow opening in the silver band. It was no longer simply warm. It felt alive, responding to every heartbeat with quiet purpose. Miriam stepped closer, her eyes filled with disbelief. "Your mother once told me these walls would only speak when the true heir of the moon returned," she whispered. "I prayed she was wrong because I knew what that truth would cost." Evelyn looked around the chamber again, noticing details she had missed before. The carved wolves were no longer facing the night sky. Their stone eyes now seemed turned toward a narrow archway hidden behind creeping ivy that had somehow survived beneath the castle for generations. A soft breeze drifted through the opening even though no windows existed underground. It carried the fresh scent of pine forests after rain, impossible for a sealed passage buried beneath hundreds of feet of stone. Above them, the celebration continued, but Caleb Thornridge could no longer ignore the invisible pull leading him away from the grand hall. Every instinct sharpened inside him with growing certainty. He excused himself from another formal introduction, leaving confused nobles exchanging polite smiles while the royal council struggled to hide their concern. Lord Aldrich quietly signaled 2 council members to follow at a distance, hoping the king would simply return to the ceremony before discovering anything hidden within Blackwood Castle. Caleb instead walked toward the eastern corridor, his pace calm but unwavering. Daniel Brooks remained beside him without asking questions. Years of service had taught him that the king's instincts rarely failed. As they approached the oldest wing of the castle, they found something that should never have been there. Fresh footprints covered the layer of dust outside an abandoned staircase officially sealed decades earlier. Caleb knelt briefly, brushing his fingertips across the marks. They were recent. Someone had passed through only minutes before. Without hesitation he climbed the narrow stone steps leading toward the forgotten tower. Deep below, Evelyn and Miriam carefully entered the newly revealed passage. Ancient lanterns lining the walls suddenly burst into gentle silver light one after another without a single flame being lit, illuminating a corridor unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Delicate carvings of moons, stars, and running wolves stretched across the ceiling, each glowing faintly as Evelyn walked beneath them. It felt less like entering a tunnel and more like stepping into a memory preserved by time itself. Then the passage opened into a circular chamber where a crystal pool reflected moonlight that should not have been able to reach so far underground. At its center stood a stone pedestal holding a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. The moment Evelyn stepped closer, the glow beneath her bracelet became brighter until the silver clasp quietly released on its own and slipped harmlessly onto the floor. For the first time in 19 years, the crescent-shaped mark upon her wrist was completely visible. It shimmered with soft silver light instead of the darkness she had always feared. Miriam covered her mouth in astonishment. "It was never a curse," she breathed. At that exact moment, Caleb reached the top of the forgotten staircase and stopped before an ancient wooden door that had somehow been left slightly open. Warm silver light spilled through the narrow gap, and although he had never stood there before, his heart recognized what waited beyond before his eyes ever could. Caleb Thornridge rested his hand against the weathered wooden door, and before he could push it open, the silver light beyond it pulsed once, as though answering his presence. A calm silence settled over the forgotten corridor, replacing the distant music that still echoed faintly through the castle above. Daniel Brooks stood a respectful distance behind, watching the king's expression change from quiet curiosity to unmistakable certainty. Caleb slowly opened the door, revealing an ancient sanctuary unlike any room recorded on the castle maps. Moonlight poured through a circular opening high above, illuminating polished stone that looked untouched by time. At the center of the chamber stood Evelyn Carter, her eyes fixed on the glowing crescent mark now visible upon her wrist. She turned at the sound of the opening door, and for the first time their eyes met without walls, iron bars, or distance between them. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The world around them seemed to disappear beneath the quiet rhythm of two hearts suddenly beating with perfect harmony. Caleb had stood before countless leaders, warriors, and kings without hesitation, yet in that single moment every title he carried seemed far less important than understanding the young woman standing before him. Evelyn felt no fear in his presence, only an unfamiliar sense of peace that gently replaced the loneliness she had carried throughout her life. The silver pendant resting upon the stone pedestal lifted slightly, suspended by a soft glow before drifting through the air with effortless grace. It stopped between them, shining brighter with every heartbeat they shared. Miriam watched in silent amazement, tears gathering in her eyes as memories of Evelyn's mother returned with unexpected clarity. She remembered the young woman speaking with unwavering hope that one day truth would rise above fear. Perhaps that impossible day had finally arrived. The quiet wonder lasted only a few moments before hurried footsteps echoed through the outer corridor. Lord Aldrich entered the sanctuary with several council elders close behind, each stopping abruptly at the extraordinary sight before them. Their confidence vanished almost instantly. The glowing mark. The floating pendant. The ancient chamber awakened after generations of silence. Every forgotten legend they had dismissed now stood alive before their eyes. Lord Aldrich lowered his head, not in respect, but beneath the heavy weight of long-hidden secrets. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "you must leave this place immediately." Caleb did not look away from Evelyn. "Why?" The elder hesitated before answering. "Because nothing good has ever followed the awakening of that mark." His voice remained steady, but uncertainty lingered beneath every word. Caleb finally turned toward him. "You told me the eastern tower was abandoned. You told me there was no one here." No one answered. Their silence revealed more than any explanation could. Evelyn quietly stepped forward, the silver pendant gently settling into her open hands as though it had always belonged there. The moment her fingers touched the cool metal, another line of ancient words slowly appeared around the edge of the crystal pool. This time everyone could read them clearly. "Truth shall return when fear no longer rules the throne." Daniel Brooks drew a slow breath while the council exchanged uneasy glances. The inscription did not accuse anyone directly, yet every elder seemed deeply unsettled by its message. Caleb looked once more toward Evelyn, then at the words reflecting across the crystal water. He understood almost nothing about the forgotten sanctuary, the glowing mark, or the mysterious pendant, but one truth had become impossible to deny. Someone had spent nearly 2 decades hiding an innocent young woman from her own king, and before another question could be asked, a distant castle bell rang 12 slow chimes, followed by a deep rumble beneath the ancient floor, as though Blackwood Castle itself had begun awakening secrets buried far older than its stone walls. The deep rumble beneath Blackwood Castle faded as slowly as it had begun, leaving an almost sacred silence inside the ancient sanctuary. Dust drifted through the silver light while every person present stood motionless, listening for whatever might come next. The crystal pool remained perfectly still until gentle ripples spread across its surface without a single stone touching the water. Caleb Thornridge stepped closer, his reflection appearing beside Evelyn Carter's for the first time. Before either of them spoke, the clear water transformed into shimmering images from another age. An ancient Alpha King stood beneath the full moon beside a Luna whose wrist carried the same crescent mark now glowing upon Evelyn's skin. They were surrounded not by frightened wolves but by joyful families celebrating together beneath silver banners. Children laughed through fields of wildflowers while elders smiled with quiet pride. It was not the picture of a forbidden destiny. It was the memory of a peaceful kingdom. Miriam covered her mouth in astonishment as another scene appeared. The joyful gathering slowly faded, replaced by a council meeting held generations earlier. Older rulers sat around a stone table while one anxious advisor declared that the moon mark gave its bearer too much influence over the future of the kingdom. Fear spread across the faces surrounding him until another voice suggested hiding every child born with the mark and rewriting the ancient records to describe the true Luna as a dangerous omen instead of a blessing. The vision dissolved before anyone could speak, but the truth remained suspended in the silence. Daniel Brooks slowly turned toward Lord Aldrich. "They changed history," he said quietly. None of the council members denied it. Lord Aldrich lowered his eyes. "Those decisions were made long before any of us were born," he answered. "We were taught that protecting the kingdom required protecting the throne." Caleb looked at him steadily. "By imprisoning an innocent child for 19 years? The elder had no answer. Evelyn stood perfectly still as countless memories suddenly made sense. The lonely birthdays, the locked tower, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever she entered the room, the bracelet that had hidden her mark instead of protecting it. None of it had been fate. It had been fear disguised as duty. She looked down at the silver pendant resting in her hands, wondering how many generations had lived believing a lie they had never questioned. The pendant responded with another gentle glow, and hidden compartments quietly opened along the curved walls of the sanctuary. Ancient scrolls and carefully preserved journals rested inside stone shelves untouched by time. Miriam recognized the familiar handwriting on one weathered journal almost immediately. "Your mother's," she whispered. Caleb carefully lifted the journal and opened its first page. Written in elegant script were simple words that echoed through the chamber more powerfully than any royal decree. "The true Luna does not rule through fear. She reminds the Alpha King why he was chosen to lead with compassion." Caleb closed the journal slowly, his expression calm yet transformed. He finally understood why every instinct had led him to the forgotten tower instead of the grand ceremony waiting above. The future of the kingdom had never been standing beneath crystal chandeliers. It had been hidden beneath stone for nearly 2 decades. Just as hope began replacing uncertainty, hurried footsteps echoed once again through the outer passage. A young royal messenger stopped at the sanctuary entrance, breathing heavily before lowering to one knee. "Your Majesty," he said with urgency, "every Alpha leader has gathered in the great assembly hall. They are demanding that the moon selection ceremony continue immediately, and they insist that the council explain why the king has disappeared." Caleb Thornridge accepted the messenger's words without changing his expression. The silence inside the ancient sanctuary lingered for another heartbeat before he turned toward Evelyn Carter. She still held the silver pendant close to her heart, its gentle light reflecting across the crystal pool like moonlight dancing upon calm water. For 19 years she had been hidden from the world, yet now the entire future of the kingdom seemed to rest quietly in her hands. Caleb stepped closer, stopping only a few feet away. "You should not have been forced to live in the shadows," he said softly. His voice carried neither pity nor regret, only quiet conviction. Evelyn searched his eyes, expecting doubt or fear after everything he had just learned. She found neither. Instead she saw the same calm strength that had united the Northern Kingdom long before they had ever met. "I do not even know who I am supposed to be," she admitted. "All I have ever known is one small room and stories that were never finished." Caleb offered a reassuring smile. "Then we will discover the rest together." Miriam lowered her head, overwhelmed by words she had once believed she would never hear. Lord Aldrich remained silent, unable to challenge the moment unfolding before him. The ancient journals, the crystal visions, and the forgotten sanctuary had stripped away generations of carefully guarded deception. Nothing could return the kingdom to ignorance now. Caleb turned toward the gathered council. Bring every journal, every record, and every scroll preserved in this sanctuary to the royal archives. Nothing will remain hidden again. Several elders exchanged uncertain glances before quietly bowing in agreement. Even those who feared the truth could no longer deny what the sanctuary itself had revealed. Together they left the underground chamber and followed the winding passage toward the upper levels of Blackwood Castle. As they emerged into the eastern corridor, servants stopped in astonishment. Guards who had spent years believing the tower stood abandoned stared in disbelief as a young woman they had never seen walked beside their king with quiet dignity. Whispered conversations spread through the castle faster than footsteps. By the time Caleb reached the great assembly hall, anticipation had already filled every corner of the enormous chamber. Hundreds of alpha leaders, respected elders, noble families, and honored guests stood waiting beneath towering banners that stretched nearly 50 feet above the polished marble floor. The music had stopped. Every conversation faded into silence as the great doors slowly opened. Caleb entered first with calm confidence. Daniel Brooks walked at his side. A few steps behind them came Miriam and the council. Then Evelyn crossed the threshold. The entire hall seemed to forget how to breathe. No one recognized her face, yet countless eyes were immediately drawn to the glowing crescent mark upon her uncovered wrist and the silver pendant resting against her hands. Murmurs spread through the gathering like wind across autumn leaves. Some whispered about forgotten legends. Others stared in confusion. Caleb continued walking until he reached the center of the hall where the ceremonial platform stood waiting for the moon selection ceremony to begin. Instead of taking his place upon the elevated throne, he descended the final step and stopped beside Evelyn. Without hesitation, he removed the royal cloak resting across his shoulders, the symbol worn only by the reigning Alpha King during sacred ceremonies. In one calm, deliberate motion, he gently placed the warm cloak around Evelyn's shoulders. Gasps echoed through the assembly. No law had been broken, yet every person present understood the meaning of the gesture. Caleb faced the gathered kingdom with unwavering composure. For generations, he declared, fear has spoken louder than truth. That ends tonight. Before another voice could answer, the full moon rose beyond the towering stained glass windows, and its silver light poured across the hall, illuminating Evelyn's pendant until it shone brighter than every torch in Blackwood Castle. Silver light flowed across the great assembly hall until every banner, every polished stone, and every face seemed touched by the same quiet glow. No one spoke. The ancient stories that had been dismissed as impossible now stood before them in the form of a young woman wrapped in the Alpha King's royal cloak. Evelyn Carter felt hundreds of eyes upon her, yet for the first time in her life she did not lower her head. The fear that had shaped 19 lonely years slowly gave way to something stronger. She was no longer standing behind locked doors or hidden beneath forgotten towers. She was standing beside a king who had chosen truth over tradition. Caleb Thornridge allowed the silence to settle before speaking again. The records hidden beneath this castle have revealed what our ancestors once celebrated and what later generations chose to conceal. The moon mark was never a symbol of danger. It was a promise that leadership would always be guided by wisdom, compassion, and hope. Murmurs spread through the assembly as royal archivists carried the recovered journals and ancient scrolls into the hall. One by one, respected historians carefully examined the preserved writings while elders compared them with the official records that had been passed down for generations. Every page confirmed the same forgotten history. The true Luna had once been honored as the heart beside the Alpha King, not feared as a threat to his throne. Lord Aldrich stepped forward with slow, measured steps. His shoulders carried the weight of years spent protecting traditions he had never questioned. He bowed his head before Caleb and then before Evelyn. We inherited fear and called it duty, he said quietly. Tonight the truth has reminded us that wisdom requires the courage to admit when we have been wrong. His words echoed through the hall with unexpected sincerity. One after another, the remaining council members lowered their heads as well. There were no cheers, no grand celebration, only a peaceful recognition that an old chapter had finally come to its rightful end. Caleb turned toward Evelyn with a warm smile that carried complete confidence. He extended his hand, not as a command, but as an invitation. After a brief moment, she placed her hand in his. The silver pendant resting against her heart glowed softly once more, and moonlight poured through the stained glass windows with renewed brilliance. Outside, wolves across the valley instinctively lifted their eyes toward the full moon, their voices joining together in a calm, harmonious chorus that rolled across forests, rivers, and distant mountain peaks. It sounded less like a declaration of power and more like a welcome long overdue. The atmosphere inside the hall became lighter, as though an invisible burden had quietly disappeared from every heart. Children smiled without understanding why. Elders exchanged thoughtful glances. Families who had traveled hundreds of miles to witness the moon selection ceremony realized they had witnessed something far greater than an ancient tradition. They had watched a kingdom choose honesty over fear. As dawn approached, the first golden rays of sunlight reached the highest towers of Blackwood Castle. Workers removed the heavy locks from the forgotten eastern tower, opening its doors and windows to the morning breeze for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Fresh air filled the once silent room where Evelyn had spent so much of her life, carrying away the loneliness that had lingered within its stone walls. Standing upon the castle balcony beside Caleb, Evelyn watched the sunrise spread across the northern kingdom with quiet gratitude. She understood that the road ahead would still require patience, wisdom, and compassion, but she also knew she would never walk it alone again. Beneath the fading moon and the rising sun, a new beginning unfolded across the kingdom, proving that the strongest leaders were not those who ruled through fear, but those who found the courage to let truth, kindness, and hope lead the way.